Hi, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I am delighted to meet you. I've experienced radical healing on a carnivore diet and I'm so excited to help you do the same. And today I've got a really special treat for you. We get to dive deep with Jonathan Shane, who grew up as an emotional eater, became obese, then lost weight, but dealt with several years of bulimia. His journey toward healing is extremely inspiring and so very relatable. You're not going to want to miss this one. As I mentioned, we've got a very special guest today. This is John.
Hello.
John is a metabolic specialist, a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, an ultra runner, and a former bodybuilder. He's struggled through some pretty tough issues such as obesity and bulimia, and he's our guest today, and he's going to spill some of the knowledge and insights that he's gained from overcoming these chronic physical and mental health problems. Now, he's typically keto, not carnivore, but I think there will be a lot of overlap for both audiences. So John, thank you so much for being here. And I would love it if you would just kind of introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the intro, by the way. I've never had someone like go through like all the things like that. That was good. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me on. So like you said, my name is Jonathan Shane. I'm a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. I am an ultra runner, meaning that I run distances, typically anything above a marathon, which is 26.2 miles. My journey started when I was 14. I was an emotional eater growing up. My mom was an emotional eater. I followed suit, had a lot of trauma with my family, just issues I had with that. And so that led to me emotionally eating a lot. So by the time I was 14, I was 260 pounds, bullied a lot, had a lot of self-image issues, self-value issues. Doctor scared the crap out of me, literally. Went home, decided I wanted to lose weight, lost all the weight in a very unhealthy manner, took all the fat out of my diet, general bro science diet stuff. But it did help me get leaner, and all of a sudden everybody loved me and I was accepted in society, and I'd always wanted that. I'd always craved that attention. And so I kind of fixated on it, and that led to an even worse relationship with myself because I got even more disassociated with my own value system, and I clung harder to the value system of others. And that ended up leading me to really struggle with my eating because I was eating in such a malnourishing way that my body wanted food. And so I was struggling with binge eating tendencies and my fear of gaining weight. And so I developed bulimia. At first it was mild. It was just every couple of weeks. And then it got more aggressive and more aggressive to the point where I was throwing up every single day, multiple times a day. My parents found out, started trying to deal with it. And then I found my faith, Christianity, and that made a big became a big pivot for me because it helped me really find value outside of myself that was extremely unconditional, and I'd never really had that. And so that helped, but it never really fully went away. Fast forward to I'm 23 now, and I was still throwing up, was married, was still throwing up every couple of months at this point. It wasn't as severe, but better. Was really still in the fitness. None of that had changed. If you saw me at the gym, I was just a guy that liked to lift weights, but internally I was just really messed up. Found keto in 2023, went 9 months without a relapse, which is the longest I'd gone without one. Did some bodybuilding. On the way after the diet, I was struggling with binging again because it's such a restrictive thing to bodybuild, and I just wasn't mentally prepared for that level of self-discipline. Ended up binging, purging. So it was September 15th of 2018 that I did that. And then I decided that for me, it wasn't just about what's on my plate, but I realized that I had the spiritual health, I had the physical health, but my mental health was a wreck. And so that's when I started working on self-love and realization and self-worth and self-value. And I really became really attracted to the idea of holistic health. And I started preaching and coaching on that in 2018. And then fast forward to 2019, I decided I wanted to know the why. So I went to NTA school and then bought my own company, and now we're here.
Wow, what a story. And that was quite a fast forward. So thank you for that. Now,
Yeah.
one thing I want to be clear on, you mentioned you started keto in 2023, but I think you meant 2018. Is that right?
No, sorry. When I was 23.
When you were 23 years
Yeah, I
old.
started keto in 2017.
Gotcha. Okay. So now you're like 28 or 29.
Correct. I'm 20. I'll be 28 this year. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. So I'd love to sort of rewind a bit and go into some of that a little deeper, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were very overweight as a kid. What was your diet like when you were growing up that led you to that overweight point?
Yeah, so I don't, it was somewhat the diet for sure. You know, I grew up very poor, 2-bedroom house, 1 bathroom, 12 people in the house. We had to turn the patio into a room, and we turned half the garage into a room to make room for everybody. And we were still living off of red beans, rice. I always make the joke, we ate tuna helper without the tuna. Like it was just the box, ramen noodles and cheese outside the window. You know, my mom made sure that we went to bed with a full stomach, and that's really all that mattered. Nutrition and things like that were not something that really crossed her mind. It was just, I need to get calories in my children. And so grew up, you know, we would eat, like, I remember many, many nights, you know, my mom would make like a beef stew. It's like ground beef and like canned veggies. And then she would like put it on the table and like put a loaf of bread on the table and a Betty Crockett butter container, and we would literally just, I would make what I call beef stew tacos. I'd take a piece of bread, swipe it with butter, put a scoop of stew, fold it, eat it, repeat. And I would do that until my stomach hurt, and then I'd be done. And while that was not good, I think what really led to my weight gain was my emotional eating. So I wasn't really a binger at that point. I was a sneak eater. So I remember vividly two things that always come to me when I think about this. The first one is, my mom would buy these, you know, you go to the dollar store and, you know, you can't buy a salad for $6 in this country, but you can go to the Dollar General and get a family sized bag of chips for 99 cents. Right. And so she would buy them. I would take one, I'd open it up, I'd put some shredded cheese inside, Valentina hot sauce specifically, shake it up, and then I'd stuff it in the side of my bed. And whenever I got upset or I wanted to go to sleep and I was sad or whatever, I would take it out, and it would literally sit there for days. I would have like day old chips covered in hot sauce and cheese. I don't even know how I'm alive. And I would take it and I would just eat until my stomach hurt. I'd always chase that full feeling. And then the other thing is, I would like always help my parents and my family like take their food back to the kitchen after they're done eating dinner. And there was a corner. And so like once I turned the corner, no one could see me. And so every time I turned that corner, I would scarf down all the scraps off their plates. So like those were like two things that I did that I really, really, when I think about my emotional eating habits. So it was things like that on top of the way we ate during our meals that ultimately led to me being that heavy.
Wow, I relate to that so much, especially the food you were being served. And I feel like a lot of that is the timing that I grew up, like 80s and 90s, that seemed very, very popular, at least amongst my peers, but you're 10 years younger. So it's not just timing. It's definitely also sort of being poor, potentially on welfare, having to feed a lot of mouths. And that was what was easy and cheap. So I can definitely relate. And speaking of relating to you, I know exactly what it feels like to be sort of emotionally eating. And I mean, I was already binging in high school, actually binging, and getting to the point where sometimes I was very overweight from it. So I know what it feels like as a girl. And I feel like people seem to understand that a lot, but not necessarily from a man's perspective. At least I don't know. So I'd love to just kind of hear how that felt as a teen, being overweight, feeling sort of slave to this urge to overeat, to calm yourself from these emotions that you didn't want. Just if you don't mind digging into that a little bit.
No, it's a good question. It's a good question. And I get asked questions like that a lot because I am a man, and men are often told you shouldn't have emotions. And while I think men should be warriors, I think that warriors are people that are comfortable in their emotions, not people that avoid them. And so I'm totally okay with talking about it. And to answer your question though, you know, I still struggle. Like today, like I was talking about this last week. Like when I think about some of the kids that picked on me back then, like I still get angry. Like there's a couple, and like, Lord, I hope I never would, but there's a couple that when I think about them now, like I still want to punch them in the face. Like just like the trauma of it, you know. I don't think it's just something we don't teach because we just don't know. And that's a whole nother conversation, because we get to like the public school social aspects of it, and just the hatefulness of sometimes, or like not even like, sometimes it's not even like intentional hatefulness. It's just like kids being kids and not realizing the implications of what they're doing to each other from like a social psychological standpoint. And yeah, I just remember like when I was younger, I was just this object that people made fun of. And I have a personality about me that I'm very outgoing, and I'm very laid back when it comes to brassness and insults. And so like my friends will often tell you, if you ask about me, like, I'm sure they say a lot of good things, I would hope. But one thing that you might hear is he's easy to pick on. Like, John's really easy to pick on. And it's because I'm very nonchalant. Like, if someone picks on me, like, I don't care. And I guess there's something about that that gives people like the green light to like keep doing it. So like, I'm just like someone that people just make jabs at. And it's like, that's just because I just don't care. Like because it's actually interesting, because nowadays I don't care because I know who I am. But back then I didn't care because I didn't want them to leave me alone. Right. I didn't care because I hated who I was. And so like, I needed it. Even if it was bad attention, I needed it. And so I was caught in a really weird spot where, I got picked on for my weight. There are, something that men probably don't talk about often is when you're a man, when you're young and you're just going through puberty and you're extremely overweight, there are things about your appearance that are not necessarily positive. And when you play football, or you play a sport, you take showers with other guys. Like, that's just something that's normal. And so those features often get shown, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing. And kids have no sense of moral compass. And so there was just many things growing up when I was overweight that were like a serious problem that I just got pounded on for years about. And like, even after I lost the weight, like, I remember when I lost the weight and there was no more issues with my appearance, I had abs, I had all the things, I was fine, I had girlfriends, those jokes would still come up just because, right? Because that's the trauma, both from like the bully and the bulliers. And like, it's almost like they couldn't even help themselves. They had to bring up the joke again because they were having a bad day, So there was that. There was just like, I just remember there was a lot of bullying going on, and there was a lot of self-hatred from me that led to accepting this. Like, it was better to laugh with them at myself than to be alone. And so I would be obnoxious. I would go out of my way to give them something to laugh at. And simply because of self-hatred, And like, I needed attention, even if that attention made me feel worse, at least I had it. And that was a really hard place to be in. And when I think about the food aspect of it, I think for me, I always knew deep down that even though I felt like I was controlling the situation by making them interact with me, I think subconsciously I knew I was never really in control. And when I was growing up, my parents were split up. And so like, I was forced to, like, every 2 weeks I'd go to my dad's, and then, I'd go to school, and then I'd come home and have to do homework. And then everything was made, all the choices in my life were made for me. And I think that's where I found solace in food, is that I could always trust my hand, right? I could always trust what hand to mouth was something that no one got to tell me what went in my mouth. I got to do that. And so it was like that one place of comfort, because it was that one place that I felt like I was actually in control of my life. And I think that's why I clung to it so aggressively.
Man, that is very heavy. Well, you clearly are not overweight now. So what was kind of the turning point that made you start the weight loss journey? Was it this doctor's appointment that you had?
Yes, it was.
So what went down in that appointment that sort of turned things around for you?
Yeah. So I remember I went to the hospital and I got on the scale and I looked down and it said 259 pounds. And mind you, I'm 14, right? I've never lifted weights. I have a 50-inch waist. This is not a healthy 250 whatsoever. But I remember back then I was really in denial because I didn't want to admit I had a problem. It's like, I remember vividly, I remember walking around and I would go up to like my friends, and like, I remember my first girlfriend, like before we started dating, I still remember this. We were walking down the hallway. We were walking past the boys' locker room towards the gymnasium. And I remember I looked at her and I was like, how heavy do you think I am? And she was like, oh, you're 200 pounds. And I was like, I'm 220. And like, there was this, I had to oh, I have muscle. I look smaller than I am because I'm strong. It's like, I was in complete denial, and I was in complete, like, I was like living in a delusion, because I didn't want to accept that the one thing I felt like I could control was actually in control of me. And so when I got on the scale, I remember seeing that number and going, yeah, like I was proud of that number. And of course, things turned really quickly, because when I went into the doctor's office, I remember her, telling me, hey, like, you're killing yourself, right? Like, you have serious heart. Like, if you were a grown man, you'd be on medication right now. And I would put you on medication if I have to at 14, right? Like, you ever seen a doctor threaten somebody with statins at 14? That was me. And I don't know, it was just, I think that people, this is another opinion of mine, I feel like some people don't like tough love, but I really think that some people don't grow because they don't get that. And like, I needed that punch in the gut. Like I needed her to tell me that because my life shifted at that point. Now, granted, obviously, as we'll talk about, it didn't necessarily go the right way all the time. But when I went home, I was like, I'm done. I'm done being this heavy. I didn't want to be fat anymore. I just wanted it to be gone. And so I went out and ran 2 miles and like passed out and like threw up and did all this stuff. It was crazy. I remember because I remember I cut my hand trying to make a protein shake. My hand was shaking so hard from after running because like my body was like, what did you just do to me? And just from then on started this journey of weight loss. And so I started running every single day, a mile or two. My hand was broke at the time, which is why I went to the hospital in the first place, because I broke my hand from football. And once the cast came off, I started lifting weights. I started, drinking protein shakes, banana, skim milk, protein powder, banana, skim milk, protein powder. And then I got into like the whole spinach game. I put like half a bag of spinach in all my protein shakes. It was like my thing, like that green colored smoothie every single day. Chicken, and then Captain Crunch and skim milk because no fat, right? And I would like look at the back of the cereal bag and I'd see all the vitamins and I'd be like, all right, bet. And like, I kid you not. And that was my diet for 2 years. And I lost 100 pounds in about 18 months from doing that.
Wow. Yeah, you can lose weight on anything, but you were young, so maybe you could have even handled a Captain Crunch and handfuls of spinach and all of that diet. Did you feel good? Or
No. I remember I did this experiment. What was it? It was a couple weeks back. I did like because when I started ultra running, I was already keto. I've been keto, low carb, animal based for 5 years. I didn't know what it was like to be a high carb runner. And so I did a week of like, what's it like to be a high carb runner. And I remember on like day 3, like waking up and feeling so groggy. And I had my first meal and I felt the energy come in and I was like, it's like I was literally like I was like dependent on my food to energize me because my body didn't know how to energize itself. And like I was like it came back to me like almost like PTSD in that moment. I remember that now. Like I remember waking up in high school and like dragging myself to the kitchen to make a bowl of cereal so I could wake up. I remember waking up to that bowl of cereal because like I needed the sugar because my body like didn't know what it was doing. But at the time, I didn't know any better. I was extremely ignorant. My mom had never seen someone try to lose over 100 pounds. She didn't know what she just bought what I said, like I was like, I need protein powder. I need veggies, and like, that was just my diet. But no, I definitely, looking back now, I could perform because I was young, right? So I could rip through it. I had a lot of pre-workout. I was super stubborn. I'm a hard-willed person. And so I made it happen. I functioned. But looking back, I definitely can vividly remember comparing it to now and then how horrible I used to function like as a human in terms of like optimal energy and all that.
That's so interesting, especially the part about when you're mostly surviving off carbs and you're an athlete, you do have to go from meal to meal to meal. I mean, you need that energy from every meal. I've never thought about that versus someone who's using fat as fuel. Your body has so much storage all the time. So that is so interesting to me. And I suppose you're really the right person to test that as someone who does ultra marathons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been really fun. I as being a ketogenic low carb runner, which is like we could do a whole podcast on that on it by itself, because it's just such a nuanced group of people that doesn't get a lot of highlight because nobody's going out and running 20 miles in one bout, right, on a ketogenic diet. So like the nuances that go into it are very different. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun to experiment and figure out like what works and remember what didn't and all that.
Interesting. Well, as you said, it wasn't like you lost this weight and then that's the end of the story, happy ending. That's then when you eventually became bulimic, right?
Correct. So I would say I was at 260, 259, and I got down to about 200. And I'd already lost 60 pounds at that point. And at that point, I was really starving myself. And so I started to really struggle with wanting to binge. And I never really struggled with binging. I already always emotionally ate, but like not binges, not like no control over, like when I was full, I would stop eating. But like I got to the point where like my body didn't care if I was full. I was still moving my arms. And so I started binging. And the problem with that was, even though I still got picked on somewhat when I was fit, I was still very much accepted, right? Like I could go up to a girl and be like, "Hey, what's up?" You know, and like she'd give me her phone number. Like I could pull things off like that. I did start hanging out with the jock friends that I always wanted, which, oh my gosh, you want to talk about some like 90210 like moments, like realizing how dumb and like I would, if I could go back to myself at that age, I'd have been like, dude, you're not going to talk to these people in 3 years. They care nothing about you. They hate themselves. Like, dude, just do you, bro. And whoever's supposed to be around you will flock to you. Like, you have so much energy, man. Like you have good energy. Like, just be you. And the people that are supposed to be around you will be around you. The other ones, stop wasting your time. But anyways, those people I was wasting my time on started to be nice to me. And so I really, at a subconscious level, associated my thinness and my leanness with social acceptance. And at the time, I was so separated from myself, and I hated myself so much that which of course I didn't realize that at the time. It's just, you know, in retrospect, I hated myself so much that I couldn't help it. Like I needed it. I needed their, like, I cannot tell you how much my day revolved around making sure other people still liked me. Like that was so much of my energy. And when I started struggling with binging, it scared the crap out of me, because I was like, I'm going to lose this thing that finally makes me feel accepted. I finally look good in clothes. I finally feel like I can be a good flirt. I finally feel like this, blah, 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 blah. And so I remember I would try certain things and nothing was working. And then I remember the first time it was Pizza Hut. It was over a Pizza Hut big box. I remember the first time I made myself throw up. And what's interesting about that, though, is when I think back on my childhood, I used to make myself throw up to get my mom to come get me from school, because I was picked on when I was a kid. And so like I would make myself throw up so that they would call my mom and let her know I'm sick, and then I get to go home. So like I think I had been looking back now, doing that deep thought, I've been using bulimia, making myself throw up, purging, as a way to connect with other people for a really long time, since I was like 4. Or so 5, 6 or 7, second, third. I remember doing it in like second or third grade. So it was something that was always there. It was a way that my need of other people's acceptance and attention manifested in a negative way, was my bulimia. And so now it was just something that was a little bit more targeted. But the problem is that because I was making myself throw up, even though that pizza was not good calories, it was at least calories. It was food. Right. And the problem was I was getting none, because even the stuff I was eating, bad or not, I was throwing back up. And so I was just malnourishing myself more, which was making me want to binge more, which was making me throw up more. And it just became this thing. And then this is where things get interesting and this isn't for all bulimics, and fair warning for people that struggle with bulimia. If you're triggered by what I'm about to say, I'm sorry. You get to a point where you actually get addicted to the bulimia. Like there's a rush to it. Like when you're making, this is going to sound so graphic, I'm sorry, but like I just have to explain it, or it won't make sense. And maybe it still won't, but when you make yourself throw up, at least, and maybe this is like a guy thing that had bulimia, I don't know. But when you make yourself throw up, it's like, it's a very stressful moment, and like you're making yourself gag, and like your body gets hot, and that shoots adrenaline through the roof. And so like when you're done, you're super lightheaded, you feel relaxed, especially if it's combined with feeling very, very full, like sickly full. And then now that feeling is gone and it's just flat stomach. Like that feeling of release on top of the adrenaline is very euphoric. And so I say that because at first it was just about avoiding the calories from the binges, but then it became just about throwing up in general. So I went from throwing up when I would want to binge on family night to now I was throwing up everything. I'll throw up a salad. I threw up salads. I threw up at school. I threw up at home. In fact, how my parents found out was I was throwing up under rocks in the backyard, and my dogs found it. And so my mom found it. And that's how they found out at home. I'd throw up in bags, throw them in the trash can. My favorite place to throw up was in the shower. And I think that one of the darkest moments, and unfortunately it didn't get fixed in this moment or right after it, but my darkest moment was I'd binged, and I went in the shower like always, turned on the shower because I would throw up because the shower would, block the sound of me gagging. And then I'd, push the food down the drain and then wash off and move on. But this time when I was trying to throw up, it wasn't coming out. And I started to freak out because like, I just realized I just ate all this food because when I knew I could throw it up, my binges got more intense because like I knew I could get rid of it. So I wasn't even stressing it. And so like it wouldn't come up and it was a big binge and I freaked out. I started crying and like dry heaving. And like, I remember like being in the shower on my knees with my hands in my mouth. My stomach's killing me because I keep trying to make myself gag. My throat's burning. I'm just crying out of just complete fear because I'm so scared of the weight I'm about to gain. I'm so scared. I'm in pain and I'm just sobbing under the shower. Like it was one of, if not the darkest moment of my life. Like I just remember like just being realizing just how broken I was in that moment. And it was just, it got really, really, really bad.
So, man, first of all, thank you for your vulnerability. That is so much to share, and I appreciate it because I've not experienced that. Honestly, I probably would have been a raging bulimic, but I could never make myself throw up. It's like my gag reflex is non-resistant or non-existent. But for those, I understand a lot of people deal with this. A lot of people message me about it, and I can't totally empathize, but you've painted such a picture of darkness. And it sounds like up to this point, you were still sort of okay. Like you found your purging to be sort of a positive thing. Was it that shower moment that you really started to realize it wasn't? Or what sort of created the thought of this is something I've got to stop doing?
So it was that. And then I can't recall what happened first, my mom finding out or me becoming a Christian, but both of them were huge moments. So I'll talk about the parents first. So my mom found out, and I think that helped because now it was awkward because my mom and my dad confronted me. My stepdad was kind of mean about it, but he didn't know how else to be. He's kind of, he's old school. He was like, why the hell would you do that to yourself? Da, 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 da. And my mom was like very concerned. And so then it was awkward because like if every time I went to the bathroom, my mom would go behind me and open the door and check the toilet, make sure it wasn't dirty. When I was at my dad's house, if I was in the bathroom too long, when I came out, he would come up and get really close to me. And when I talked, he was trying to smell my breath to make sure I didn't smell like vomit. Like it was things like that started to become really just hard that they were aware of it at the time. And that helped a bit. And as much as it sucked, it helped because it helped me. Granted, I still did it. I found other ways to do it, but like there was a level of like, okay, I can't do it here. And I think parents struggle because they struggle between letting their kid be a little free, but also like not being like the overcrouching parent. And I think as someone that has found freedom from something, I can say like your boundaries matter even if we don't like them, because they help us. Even if we don't like them, like they do help. And it's easy for parents, especially in this culture, in this day and age, to back off of boundaries for the sake of their children. But it's like, you're not really helping them by enabling them, at least from my perspective. And so I was really thankful for that. But the reality is that you cannot help them if they're not willing to help themselves. And at that time, I still wasn't willing to help myself. What a real big change for me was when I found Christ. So I didn't grow up in church. My mom took me to church when we were younger, and she's a Christian, but my stepdad, isn't, and good people, but just not believers. And I just didn't go to church. And when I was 16, because this time we haven't even talked about we're talking just about my eating disorder. So like, we're not talking about the drugs, the alcohol, the sex, none of the other stuff, just the eating disorder. And I had a lot going on at that point, got to a suicidal point a few times, like just thoughts, like those thoughts of just like, I'm done. I'm tired. This is dumb. And my friend, Jacob, my best friend to this day, he gave me his Bible, and I just started reading it and I liked it. And I went to a Bible study, and someone shared that Jesus died for me, and that the things that I was trying to do to feel happy were the things that were separating me from my source of happiness. And there was something about that really resonated. And they said, yeah, but the thing is, you can't fix it, but Jesus can, right? He did, and you can accept that and be changed. And it was the first time someone had offered me something of value and worth outside of me, right? Like it wasn't like it doesn't matter if I was fat, happy, sad. It didn't matter. Jesus died 2,000 years ago. So like his love and his death was unconditional towards me, because like nothing, it didn't change. It doesn't matter what I do. I could go cut my arm off, or I could lose my arm, or I could go blind. It doesn't matter. What he did does not change. Right. And there was something about that it was so unique. I'd never experienced it. I've never been told about a love like that. It was just, I was like, okay, I want that. Like I need that. And so I confessed and became a Christian that day. And I remember I felt God for the first time. And it was a wild moment, because I don't know. It was just crazy, because I just realized the truth. I really did in that moment. And I know some people don't agree with that, but I mean, that's their opinions. I know what I felt. And it was different at that point, because now I realized that I was bought with a price, and that my body wasn't my own, and that someone had died for it. And so I shouldn't be destroying it. And so that's when I really started to fight it. Like when I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. Now, granted, the reality is a spiritual base is great, but actions and discipline and mental health and physical health and nutrition all play a role in building the castle that is your life. And so I couldn't just lean on God. I had to push my hands to the plow. But that's what I did for a while. I was just like, all right, I understand I have value, right? But I would still, every couple months I would have a bad day. I would feel stressed out and I would throw up. But it got better. I definitely started to address it at that point, and I became a Christian literally like 2 months before I became 17. So I had bulimia super severe for about 2 years. And then from the time I was 17 until I was 23, it was a lot less severe, but still there for sure.
Okay, we'll come back to the 23-year-old
Yeah.
bulimia. I'd like to ask just a couple questions about the high school time.
Yeah.
So 2 things. One, do you feel like there was a stigma about you having bulimia because you were a boy? I had a friend who was cutting himself, and he told me that his dad said, that's a girl problem. So I'm curious if this ever came up for you. And number 2, you had social media in high school. That is nothing I ever experienced. I didn't have it till college. So I'm curious if that played any factor in anything, your self-worth, you mentioned briefly drugs, sex, alcohol, all that. Did social media play an impact on any of that?
No. Okay. So hold on. This is good. Okay. So first question, stigmas. No one knew I had bulimia. No one. Because I had already dramatically lost weight from working out. No one like it's interesting looking back now. There are photos of when I was like 18, 19, and I look sickly thin, like just frail, like jawline, little arms, just tiny. And I remember thinking I was so fat in those photos. But just super sickly. And but no one knew. No one knew.
But your parents knew. Your parents knew.
Yeah, my parents.
Change at all in that?
Not once. My mom was really, because my mom is a woman, she's very sensitive with her words, and she's empathetic. I'm not saying all women are empathetic, but I tend to see most women I know are empathetic, much more empathetic than men. And so she wasn't going to say anything that was going to be detrimental. Like all she wanted was to see me get better. So she was always, my mom's always been careful of what she says to me, like always. Like even to this day, we'll be talking and she'll stumble over a sentence 10 times just to make sure she says it right, while considering how I would react to every other way she could say it. Like she's a very thoughtful woman, which I was very blessed to have her growing up for sure. But no, I never got told that ever. When I was older and I started talking about it to people outside of my parents, that definitely got brought up. Oh, generally girls struggle with that, but men, I think men do as much as girls. I just don't think it's talked about. Like I think like you do see stereotypically like you see like there's like you'll have friends of like girl groups that like they all do it, and they and it's like a thing, like maybe not together, but like they talk about it. It's like a thing that they struggle with. But like men, it's like it's a very isolated lone wolf, because for us it's like super embarrassing. And so and we're not supposed to tough it out. And so like it's a lot more of like a lone adventure for men, I feel. in general, right? Obviously there's the outliers, there's the, because I'm sure there'll be men they could listen to this and email me and go, hey, I had a group of friends. And then likewise, there could be women that could email me and be like, I was all by myself. I totally resonate with your story. It happens all the time when I share this. But in general, that's what I noticed, but never was I talked to about it and like that. I was never told it was like a girl problem. And then as far as the social media, Instagram became a thing when I was a junior in high school, right? And then before that, I would say probably like my freshman, sophomore year, we have to think about it. You and me use Facebook all the time, right? For like social media and like content. When I was in high school, like Facebook was still like a college old people thing. Like we didn't use Facebook. Facebook wasn't a thing teenagers used. So it was like Instagram. I think Snapchat had just started when I was a senior in high school. So I was like right at the cusp of it. Now, text messages came out when I was in 8th grade. Now that was a thing because I do remember, obviously, because I grew up in a really, teenagers, there were rumors and things that would be spread about other people. And I remember like a good handful of times that like I would get a text message with like a story or a photo or both, and it was of somebody in the school, and then everybody else's phone would start going off, and people would do like these so like you make one mistake and someone else catches it, and the whole school would know in 20 minutes, and that was wild. It was wild time. I don't know what goes on in high school because I don't know how things travel. Like maybe they just post it on social and then it takes like a couple of days for everybody to catch on. But like back then, text messages were like the thing, and so like it would spread. It would swarm like flies, like gossip and stuff. So I saw more of that. It didn't really impact me much. Again, mine was really like just dealing with the people right in front of me, not necessarily like mine was like more of outside out of mind. Like if I didn't see you, I didn't really care, but it was like what was going on right in front of me? How are the people right in front of me treating me? I think subconsciously when we're doing something wrong, we know it's wrong, but like I can't remember ever taking the time. Like I remember when like my mom found out, or like when my wife would find the toilet dirty when I first got married, and I remember being embarrassed in those moments, but like until it happened, it never really crossed my mind. Like until someone found out, like it never crossed my mind. What if somebody finds out?
Sure. Okay. So fast forward into your 20s. I know you had basically a relapse with your bulimia. Was that started by bodybuilding? Is that when you started to get into that?
Yeah. So I was always been a gym nut, played football, and football, everybody's meatheads. It's all about lifting the heaviest weight, a lot of testosterone in a room, a lot of sweaty guys. And so there's a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of, and so I was always into lifting weights and all the energy that comes with it. The bulimia was, again, like every couple of months, et cetera, et cetera. Got married when I was 20. And then when I was 23, I found the ketogenic diet, and I did a lot of yo-yo dieting. So I would like starve myself. I'd eat like 1,200 calories a day. So even if I wasn't throwing up, I was purging through calories. I would like basically starve myself for like 5 days, and then I would binge and then purge. So like bulimia is like a really extreme version of anorexia at times. And so like I was doing these purge binge cycles, whether it was through fasting, cardio, or throwing up. Like I was doing something to purge. And I would do these yo-yo diets, and then I found keto, and keto I started eating. I was basically doing carnivore, honestly. When I think about it, my diet was like butter in my coffee, no stevia, butter in my coffee, because stevia wasn't really a thing back then. It was butter, heavy cream. And then for lunch and dinner, lunch, I usually had 2 beef patties, and then with pickles, and then dinner was a bacon wrapped chicken leg quarter. And that's what I ate for like 3 months every day. And I got shredded. It was great. Like something I talked about on a call the other day was how like I don't think I needed to lose weight at the time, because I think that it was just feeding my need to be lean. But one thing I can tell you about a carnivore ketogenic diet is that it does something really interesting where it nourishes your body, but also doesn't trigger the triggers that you normally have. So like, whereas like if you eat a high carb diet, right? One, the amount of food I would have to eat to nourish my body would probably make me gain weight and water, even if it's just water weight. And that would have triggered me at that time. It wouldn't now, but it would have then. Whereas the ketogenic diet, I can eat meat, bacon, eggs, all that jazz, or the keto carnivore, whichever one, and I lose weight or maintain and I'm nourishing my body. So I'm getting nourished while also not triggering myself, which is the foundation you need to actually start dealing with an eating disorder. Because until that foundation's built, you can't actually address the deeper rooted issues. And so I went keto, and it was interesting because, like, again, there was this weird, like, it was like, I knew I was bulimic, but like I ignored it. It was weird. So like when I stopped doing it, I didn't even recognize I had stopped doing it. I just stopped throwing up. And I did keto for 3 months. And then I wanted to get into bodybuilding because I'd always lifted weights. I played with the idea of prepping before, but it didn't really work out. So I Googled ketogenic bodybuilders. Robert Sykes, Keto Savage, popped up on YouTube. This is in 2017. Emailed him, he emailed me back, signed up for coaching, started a prep in December of 2017. And then I prepped until August of 2018. So that whole time, from the time I started keto until I got on stage in August. And then afterwards, though, because the thing is, even on keto, when you bodybuild, you starve yourself. And so there's like this crazy reduction in hunger hormones. And so when I started reverse dieting, I just wasn't prepared for the hunger levels, and the hunger levels triggered me because that's what I used to feel like. And so I was struggling not to binge. And I remember my last relapse with bulimia was September 15th of 2018. And I ate an entire bucket of keto ice cream. It was like 2,000 calories. I ate it in like 5 minutes. I just went crazy on it. I made myself throw up. And that'd been 9, but that's what I'm saying. So like, I didn't even think about the fact that I hadn't thrown up until that day. Like when I threw up that day, when I got done and I walked outside of my apartment, I was like, I haven't thrown up since I started this diet. Okay. And that's when I was like, I'm done with this. I don't want to do it anymore. Like I'm done. And I just recognized that, like, while the diet was good, it wasn't the only piece. Right. And so I was like, I put everything together and I was like, okay, I have a good relationship with God. I have a good wife. She loves me unconditionally, right? She doesn't care if I gain 20 pounds or gains 5, but if I gain 50, she'll tell me I'm dying. Like, like she's honest with me, but she loves me unconditionally, no doubt. My nutrition's on point. What's missing? And that's when I really got into like the self-love, and I really started to come to all the things I just explained to you, like hating myself, how I felt about people in high school, all of that, I started to understand and know in those years, from the time I was 23, well, until now, really. But those first couple of years of like 23 to 25, like that's when I was working through that self-development. And that's when I came to realize all those things I just articulated to you. So up until that point, I had never really reflected on any of that. It was just something I harbored deep inside myself.
Okay, so that brings up so many thoughts. Ever since I've become carnivore and been on social media talking about that, I've kind of seen two patterns when it comes to disordered eating. Mostly it's binge eating, people that are talking to me, because that's what I experienced, but bulimia and anorexia too. It seems like people fall into one of two camps. Either there's this whole emotional sort of self-love piece, or there's what I experienced, which is more the biology piece that you touched on a lot already, how when you're not eating nourishing foods, your body is smart. It's smarter than our desire to look a certain way. And so it's going to make you have urges. And once you've developed this pattern to give into these urges, it's so hard to break that when you're working against your biology and you're working against these really rigid habits. And so what I usually work through people with is like the biological piece, the keeping the insulin down, the optimizing the gut biome, and decreasing all the sort of food related dopamine hits. But you're suggesting that for you, it was really more of that emotional sort of self-worth, self-love kind of thing. So do you have any just simple advice on where to start when that's the problem?
Yeah. So, and I think before the advice, I think you might be asking, well, who am I in that? And I think that you have to take time, and this might actually answer the question. You need to take time to ask yourself why. Now, people talk about like why are you getting healthy? What's your why? But something I tell people that I talk through with this, clients or just people on the internet, is, okay, why are you doing the unhealthy thing? We never talk about that. We always talk about let's get motivated and talk about why we're doing the healthy thing. But it's like, well, hold on. Why are you doing the unhealthy thing first? Like, let's figure that out. What's the lie you tell yourself every day before you go to sleep? Right? Why do you do these things? And I think that's where you get that answer. That's where you'll figure out which camp you're in, right? If it's just biology, then if there is like, there might not be a deeper why. It might just be, well, when I eat right, I feel in control. When I don't, right? But I mean, I could binge eat a salad, and I purged on keto. So obviously there's environments in keto where I can obviously put myself in those kinds of situations. But my issues were deeper. It wasn't just the food, the meat, while the lack of nourishment in my food exacerbated my issues, the whole reason I lacked nourishment in my food was because of my issues, right? Like my lack of self-love led to my emotional eating, that led me to want to starve myself, that led to my malnourishment, that triggered the manifestation of my bulimia. So like, that's what you have to ask yourself, is like, does it just stop at I was eating too many Cocoa Krispies, or does it stop at because I hated who I was, I didn't feel in control, and I wanted something that comforted me, so I ate Cocoa Krispies? Like, you say, like, what's the starting point for you? And I think that not everybody's going to be the same. That's something I've learned. I remember when I first did this, I used to think everybody had a deep why. Like everybody, it's like, oh, come on, you have some kind of childhood trauma. You have to, like, no, but like for some people, it's not. Some people, it really is just like they were just in the wrong spot at the wrong time, and they were feeding themselves the wrong things that triggered the wrong neurological pathways that led to these compulsive habits. And that's okay. Recognizing that is good, because then now you have the foundations to make sure you don't put yourself in that position again. But for someone that it's deeper than that, that's not enough. That's the thing, is that for someone that it's, if for someone like me, just that is not enough, because there are things in that environment that can still trigger my bad habits. I always tell people I am never a fully recovered bulimic. I will always have bulimia. I don't now because of the boundaries I have in place. There are certain foods I'll never eat. There's certain lines I'll never cross. There's a certain way that I look at myself. You know, I no longer walk into a room and want others to like me. I walk into a room and I know who I am. Very different person, right? So those things keep me from giving in to an environment that would trigger me. But that's because I went deeper. So I guess to answer your question, and maybe I already did, but I guess to answer your question, for someone that is trying to deal with more of a self-image issue, you have to get down to the root cause of why you don't like who you are. And that's going to hurt, and it's going to be hard, and it might not happen fast. It took me a while to really figure out what all of my issues stemmed from, and like where those moments happened. Like I'm at the point now where like I can, like right now I could recall a lot of the moments that triggered some of the traumatic perspectives I used to have towards myself. Like I can like recall those things because I've worked through them. I've broken down the trauma, and you might not be able to do that on your own. You might need to get a therapist. That's okay. It's okay to get therapy. It's okay to get healthy, right? So I would say that you need to figure that out. You need to figure out what made you feel the need to go to food to feel love, control, and comfort. And why can't you find those things within yourself? And you need to answer that question.
That's so good. I have one more question on this topic. So I've heard this story a lot from people doing bodybuilding competitions or bikini shows, that kind of thing, that binge eating and bulimia are just rampant in that population. But I'm sure there's a healthy way to do it. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, is it appropriate ever for anyone who's dealt with and maybe overcoming an eating disorder to do something like that that is so restrictive? Is there a way that they can do that, keeping their mental health intact?
Absolutely. I mean, like, so I'm doing a series on my podcast called Psychology of Food. And I actually just recorded the first episode, and it's with my friend Robert Sykes, Keto Savage. And we talked about him and his eating habits when he was struggling before he found keto. And I don't want to give it away. I want him to share it on the podcast, but basically like he preps, you know, now he's in the middle of a bodybuilding prep, and he's doing fine. And I know he'll do fine on the way out, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely think people that have struggled before can get right and do bodybuilding right. Um, do I think like I think that you have to ask yourself if it's really something you want to do. Why are you doing it? Like, are you doing it because you want to be shredded and you just want abs? And that's the only reason, because that kind of shallow desire will lead to a shallow result. And you may end up really struggling with it. And it may end up triggering you, because eventually, once you hit those shreds, they're going to go away. And you have to ask yourself, when the shreds go away, do I have the self-control and self-discipline to realize that that's okay, because that's not a healthy level of body fat for a human, and this is supposed to happen, and this isn't going to trigger me to go eat a bunch of ho-hos and then throw up? Like, do you have the ability to talk yourself through that? If not, stay away from it. Now, other people, you might, like, I've considered doing it again. I haven't done it since I've done it once since I got over my eating disorder, and then COVID happened, so I didn't finish the prep. But I did diet for a prep one time, and I would tell you it's different when you have that level of self-confidence, self-control, and just the fact that I remember afterwards, after the photo shoot, and during the reverse diet, I remember stopping and reflecting many times on how in control I felt of myself. Not that I wasn't hungry. I was hungry, right? It's just, it's just normal. You're going to be hungry after starving yourself like that. But I remember just going, I have no desire to binge or throw up. Not going to happen. Like, I had a resolve about it. And I think that words without action lack identity, right? And so, like, people talk a lot, but they don't have a lot of action. And I think for some people, sometimes they need to put their money where their mouth is. And for some people, like, all right, I'm in control, I have self-discipline. They need to put themselves in a situation that challenges that control and discipline so that they can prove to themselves that they have it. And so I know I'm like that. And so for me, running, bodybuilding, these are all things that I do because I believe I'm strong. I'm confident in my abilities. I know that I'm tougher than most people. I know that I'm willing to wake up earlier than most people. Like, and these actions solidify the words that I tell myself. And that's what helps give me confidence in my identity. So I think yes. I know there's a long answer for your question, but I think, yes, there is a way to do it. I think you have to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and that you have the resolve and that you're capable. But I do think it's something that, unless you have a really strong why around it, you should really consider not doing it, because you don't want to bring up past demons that you're not ready to fight.
Yeah. So basically, you need a lot of self-reflection and everything we've discussed on why you might have an eating disorder, on why you would want to do a bodybuilding show, on why it might be a struggle afterwards. And I hear that so deeply. I don't necessarily have a huge desire to do a show, but like, maybe that would be something I would potentially do. But I know that I'm still in this place where when I restrict too much, like I try fasting or I try cutting my calories too low or anything like that, I still have a lot of those kind of old bingey thoughts and feelings. And so, I just know it's not wise for me to do something like that. And maybe someday it will, but it's not worth it to me to risk it now. And I'm sure many people are in that camp. And so I appreciate you saying that. Like all things with the keto diet or carnivore diet or anything like that, it's just a little different for everybody. And it requires a lot of self-reflection and sometimes some outside help, which leads me down to the path of talking about your coaching. I know you now are a coach. So how did you get into that? And what kind of coaching do you offer now?
Yeah, so I started coaching, and right after I got done with my bodybuilding show, Robert he has this company with Matt and Mega from Keto Connect called Deeper State Keto, and they were hiring coaches. And I remember I was like a fitness coach at like LA Fitness before that. I had done fitness coaching at the Houstonian Golf Club. So I've always been into fitness and stuff. So there's always been something I've thought about doing. And so I got the job, and I started pushing on social media hard. I started being vulnerable about this story, talking like this to people, very vulnerably, and people just resonated. And I started to build an audience, and I started to get clients. And at that time I was really just coaching on like a strict ketogenic diet. And then in 2019, I really wanted to step out and bet on myself. And so I left Deeper State Keto and I bought my own company. Still love them, love what they're doing there. I just wanted to really just figure out, who am I? What am I? What is this? Like again, 2019, I was really working on that self-reflection, things like that. And at the same time, I decided to go to school, and I wanted to know the why to the what. Like I knew what was going on in my body, like what keto was doing. I want to understand why it was doing it. Like, why was meat so powerful to the body? Why is fat? I wanted to understand these things. So I went to the NTA, which is Nutritional Therapy Association. They're accredited by the NAMP, the Houston, the Holistic Board of Nutritional Professionals, like board accredited. It's a great school. And went there, blew my mind, opened my mind to so many things. I had so many aha moments in class, so many aha moments. And I came out of that very focused on metabolic health and holistic health. So I went into the practice of metabolic health. So like before that, I'd already really kind of become fascinated with metabolic health because of my bulimia. My metabolism was jacked up. And so I had to heal it. And so like reverse dieting, anti-inflammatory diets, ketogenic diets, weightlifting, all that fitness, like anything that encapsulates like a healthy metabolism, I became fascinated with, which is why I call myself a metabolic specialist. And so did that, was really working with some men, some women, did that for a couple years. And then about what was it? After my last prep, so it had been 2020. I got into running, and running gave me some complications that we can dive into if you want to, but it gave me some complications with my diet that led me to start learning more about cortisol regulation and suppression, which led me to study more about carbohydrates as they relate to a ketogenic carnivorous diet, understanding that, experimenting, applying, and really changed my view on some things, opened my mind to not a different view, but a more broad idea of things when it comes to bioindividuality in humans. And then that led me to seeing a lot of parallels between my endurance training and women's hormones and cycles. And I already had a deep connection because I was raised by a single mom. So like I've always had like a care for seeing, women thrive. Like as my mom, I've always felt that way. And I had a lot of women clients that would come to me, and the things I was doing just wasn't working. And I would have to, I was doing the same thing I did with all my other clients in terms of like, checking the blood labs and reverse dieting and keto and and same thing that worked. And for some women and some men, it worked great. For some women, it didn't work at all. And we would end up having to part ways. And I didn't like that. I don't like that some coaches say, oh, what I'm doing isn't working for you. You must not be doing it. Right. Because I know that makes women feel so invalidated. And I was like, I'm not going to be that person. No freaking way. So I started to do a lot of deep research, and I became super fascinated and passionate about women's health. And so now what I offer holistic nutritional therapy. And so we have two programs as of right now. We have basic weight management, which is basically macros, weight loss, strict keto. People come to me then generally because they need accountability, a little bit of accountability, some guidance in their macros, someone to pick a brain, etc. And then I have the holistic health program, which is all encompassing. It focuses on it's more of my clinical work. So like we look at nutritional deficiencies, blood labs, hormones, and then most of my clients are women. So I help a lot of women deal with regulating their cycles on a ketogenic diet, finding hormone balance, going through menopause in a healthy way, finding a healthy way to do the ketogenic diet for them post menopause. And I love it. It's great. I freaking love my clients.
So awesome. I'm sure they love you too. Now, you mentioned that you cycle sometimes between keto and carnivore. Tell me about that. And also, do you work with clients that are carnivore?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I do. I do work with clients that are carnivore. So I like to use carnivore as a gut reset, as a lean reset. So like if I'm feeling watery, I'll go carnivore. If I just want, if I notice that I'm putting too much stevia in something, and I'll go carnivore for a couple weeks. For me, it's a great reset. It's a great foundation to build on top of. And the thing is, I already do animal based. So I literally, whether I'm doing carnivore or not, I eat 2 pounds of meat every day, every day. It's just when I'm carnivore, it might turn into 3. And then everything else goes away. But yeah, like I just probably, I'd say like 4 or 5 times a year, I'll take 2, 3 week and I'll just go carnivore for 2 or 3 weeks, kind of give myself a reset and then go back to what I was doing. That does work well for me in the long term. It's just sometimes I really like picking out on chickens. I don't know. And then in terms of my clients, yes, I do work with some carnivore clients because helping them figure out, do they need to be on a high fat carnivore diet? Do they need to be on a high protein carnivore diet? How can they train around their carnivore diet to get the most out of it? Fasting, meal timing, etc. Learning how to stimulate because I run into a lot of issues where like a lot of carnivores, because the diet is so appetite suppressing, they malnourish themselves on accident. Like they don't mean to, it's unintentional, but it just happens. And so teaching them how to manage that in a better way so that they can make sure they're getting in everything they need. And so things like that is what I generally work with when it comes to carnivore clients.
Awesome. So you mentioned you had some issues when you started all the running. I'd love to hear about that and whatever advice you can give. Let's give if the viewers are still watching this far in, let's give them something to take home. So maybe when it comes to exercise and particularly endurance training, what have you found are tweaks that are necessary on a low carb diet?
Absolutely. So what I found, so I was strict keto for 5 years and I started running. And 5 years, 5 years and 4 years. I'm doing the math. 2017, 2020, 2020, 17, 2021. Yeah, 4 years. And I was like, I remember when I first started running, I was hell bent on like, I'm zero carbs, dog. I don't need carbs, bro. I was all about that life. And at first it was great. Like my fat adaptation took off and I was progressing so well in my running. And then all of a sudden I started to notice it was gradual at first. Like I was just noticing, like I would look down at my heart and like my heart rate would be higher than it should be at this pace. I'm like, okay. And then like the next week, even higher. Next week, I feel like I'm out of breath. What the actual heck is going on? And then I got injured. I'm like, why am I getting injured? And, of course I start stretching. I'm trying different shoes. I'm doing all the things so I heal from that injury. Heart rate's still super elevated. I'm not sleeping. I get injured again. What the heck? It was my hip and then it was my Achilles. And then work on my running form, blah, blah, blah. Start running again. Heart rate is still, but this time my heart rate's crazy. My heart rate resting is crazy. My wife's thinking about saying I should go see a doctor. I'm having mood swings. I'm super depressed and tired all the time. And I'm like, what? I'm gaining weight. I cannot lose weight. I'm running like 50 miles a week and I'm supposed to be burning like 5,000 calories extra a week and I'm gaining weight. What the actual heck is going on? I tried everything. I did carnivore. I did high fat keto. I did alternate day fasting. You name it in terms of like standard keto procedure. I tried it. Nothing. I was just getting worse. And I really remember, and I kid you not, I think it's important to differentiate, and just to say this before I continue, someone that is trying to find an excuse to eat ho-hos, and then someone that's really just trying to like figure out what's optimal for them, right? There's very different people. And so this person, the ho-ho person, cannot use this as an excuse to eat ho-hos because this is not the same thing. I remember sitting though at a bar at my friend's house and they were worried about it because they could just see how depressed I looked. And I remember my friend was like, you should try targeted carbs. And I remember just being like, no way. No, there's another way to do this. And so I kept trying and nothing was working. I remember, and my blood sugar was crazy. So my blood sugar before I started running was like in the 70s. And then now it was like 120. It was like pre-diabetic. And I had over 20 grams of carbs in years. And it was wild. Like stuff that based off of the information that we've been given in this space makes no sense. It's okay. It gets weirder. So I'm like, okay. I remember I fasted all day one day and I had an 80% fat day, therapeutic ketosis level macros. Woke up the next morning, my blood sugar was 115. And I was like, okay, this is dumb. And I have the spreadsheets to prove this. I can share these spreadsheets with you. And long story short, I decided, okay, I'm going to give this targeted because it was either I give up running or I figure something else out. And so I remember the first time I sat down with sweet potato for the first time in 5 years, and it felt so dirty. Let me tell you, I felt like I was breaking a streak here. It felt wrong. But I was like, man, okay, so I checked my blood sugar. It was like 120. I ate the sweet potato. I kid you not. 2 hours later, my blood sugar was 79. It
Crazy.
smashed my blood sugar. And I didn't understand it at the time. All right. And so I have this spreadsheet and you can look through it and like, I'm like, okay. And so I started to get more confident in it. So like I'm doing like 50, 60 grams of carbs from like sweet potato, squashes. I'm still staying away from grains, all that. And my blood sugar, I woke up the next morning, my blood sugar was 90, 95. Within 2 weeks, my blood sugar was back in the 70s. And I added carbs to my diet. That shouldn't make any sense. Right. And I'm just like, my runs got better. Within 2 weeks, my running was improving again. I have not injured myself while running since. Not once. And my ketones went up. My ketones went up. I hadn't been in ketosis in months and I hit 0.5 3 weeks into this. It was wild and I didn't understand it. Now I do. So what was happening was due to the glycogen replenishment needs of endurance running with cross training, so lifting weights too, the chronic cortisol response of that is so high that it creates physiological insulin resistance because it's basically, you're basically creating the same environment inside your body that you were creating outside of it when you're eating crap. Much more in a more mild sense, but still there. It's still very prevalent and it's causing you issues. The only macronutrient that suppresses cortisol really is carbohydrates. That's why you crave it when you're stressed, right? Now, albeit most people, they go eat Bluebell when they're stressed, but like, you know, like that's why people crave it. There is a physiological component. It's not just psychological and impulse. There is an intuition there that, you know, we have to think about, but, my body needed it. And so like the reason why my blood sugar crashed was because it was up because my insulin was constantly elevated because my cortisol was constantly elevated. And so when I ate that sweet potato, it smashed my cortisol down and told my body, hey, you don't have to keep stressing. We've got the fuel that you're trying to get right now. Because what does your body want when it's stressed? Glucose. Why? Because it wants to get out of the situation as fast as possible. That's why, like, even on carnivore, if you yell at your kids, your blood sugar is going to spike. It just is. Like your body, that's how your body responds to stress. So when that's chronic, your blood sugar is going to be chronically elevated, which is going to make your body chronically inflamed. That's physiology. You're going to create internal insulin resistance. And so those carbs, not a lot, you know, I still don't eat a lot, especially compared to high carb athletes. But those carbs timed at the right times were helping regulate my cortisol, which was allowing me to burn fat better and become a better runner. And it was very eye-opening for me. And it just made me, again, it's very nuanced, right? Because it's endurance athletes. But it's definitely a truth. Like there is not a single, and I say this with confidence, and it's going to sound weird to some people, there is not a single strict carnivore endurance athlete. Not one. There's not a single one that just eats meat. They all, and unfortunately, some of them are so lack of empowered and they're just trying to put up a facade on social that they eat steak and that's all they post. And then on race day, they eat chips because they can't just cycle in some honey because they're scared of their image. So they just hide it. But like, I mean, I know that. I'm not telling somebody that, but I know that. But like, it's just something that we have to do. And it doesn't mean you have to do it in an unhealthy way, right? You can like grow, like I'm growing spaghetti squash in my backyard right now, like literally in the soil, the compost that I made from my eggshells and my decomposed foods grew my vegetables that I'm going to eat to help my runs. Like there's a healthy way to do it, but basically, yeah. So if you're an endurance athlete, and you're trying to be a low carb ketogenic endurance athlete, here's my 3 pieces of advice. 1, lift weights. Lift heavy freaking weights. Bone density and ligament and joint strength is what's going to make you shout out above the rest. The second thing is make sure you understand your nutrients, right? Fats, essential. You need them, especially with the amount of cortisol you do produce. You're going to suppress sex hormones. Understanding that is super important. Best source, animal fats, hands down. Protein, animal proteins. You got to eat a lot of meat, and you're going to have to eat more than you used to because you need more protein than the average person because you break down a lot more muscle than the average person. Eat your meat. And then the third thing is learn how to handle carbs in a whole food proper way. Know when you need them on training days, not on rest days. On long runs, I would say shoot for about 20 grams per hour. So like to give you an example, a high carb athlete shoots for about 100 grams per hour, whereas a low carb ketogenic athlete is going to shoot for about 20. So like we're way more glycogen sparing than them. There's so many advantages that low carb endurance athletes have to high carb endurance athletes, but it's just knowing what we need and what we don't. So 20 carbs per hour on long runs, having some targeted carbs on your training days, be more carnivore on your rest days. You can even be carnivore. You can even just do like meat and a bunch of like on your training days, do honey and still keep it all meat. Like you can do that if you want. It's really up to you and how you want to do it. But those would be like my 3 big pieces of advice.
That's great advice. Now, as a disclaimer, because you said there's nobody who's pure carnivore as an endurance athlete, someone will inevitably say, I am, I swear to God. So I would just want to point out the most helpful thing that I kind of grasped from what you said is getting the objective data. You know, you were tracking your heart rate, you were tracking your glucose, you were tracking your ketones. And so you know for a fact how you were responding. And I don't think people should just do things based on what they're hearing on the internet without having some objective data for themselves. So I appreciate that.
Yep. 1000%. I think that's, something I said at my KetoCon talk was you should not be walking in your favorite influencer's shadow. Stop it. Stop it. I don't care if all they've eaten their entire lives are kumquats or ribeyes. I don't care. What do you need? If all you need is bacon, then just eat bacon. But like you should know through confidence in yourself and how you feel. Like if something's making you feel like crap and you're doing it because someone else is telling you to do it, why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? That makes no sense. But we do that. And then like we talk to that person and then of course I do think that there's a fault with some of the influencers because they can get very like tunneled. And it's like, oh, well, we'll just wait it out. And it's like, maybe they shouldn't wait it out. Maybe it's not for them, maybe not. But yeah, no, I agree. I think you hit that nail right on the head and be observational and like know thyself, right?
Yeah. So I think in the carnivore community, especially what I see a lot of is there are several influencers out there who thrive on just super high fat and just eating sticks of butter. Now, I know I don't feel good when I do that, so I don't. But I hear from people that they feel terrible doing that and they don't understand. And it's exactly what you're saying. Like, not everything is for everyone. And so not only is that objective data helpful, but again, some self-reflection of how do you feel? Does it seem good to eat a stick of butter? If so, great. If not, don't feel like you have to do that.
In fact, I'll give you 3 examples. I had a client that came to me and they were carnivore with fasting and I got them to do now they're doing higher protein animal based and they cycle in carbs around their cycle and they've lost like 40 pounds doing that. Another client, super high fat carnivore, was just gaining weight like crazy. Tried high protein, didn't lose the weight. She's now strictly low carb. She eats 120 grams of carbs a day, and she has abs. It's great, right? And then I have another client that came to me that was low carb, dirty-ish keto, and we have her on a high fat carnivore diet, and she got shredded, right? So 3 different people, 3 different starting points, 3 different endpoints, and all of them are hitting their goals. That's what matters. What do you as an individual need? And you have to make sure that you are staying out of your own way. And oftentimes we don't. We want to look like our favorite person and we're not willing to see ourselves through an objective lens.
Yeah, absolutely. So based on your training and your experience, your personal experience and your experience with clients, it seems like you've really gained a lot of knowledge on how to tweak things for people. So if somebody is interested in working with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, theketoroad.com, the Keto Road on Instagram, theketoroad@gmail.com. You can do john@theketoroad.com. Email me. I do free consultations. So if you're like, okay, I want to talk to this guy. I want to see if this is even worth getting coaching by him. I do free 30-minute calls. You can schedule a call with me. We can chat it up. We can figure out if it'd be a good fit. I like doing that because I don't like to sell people just to make money. Like for me, it's like, if I don't think you're a good candidate for my coaching, I'll just tell you, hey, I don't think this is going to be a good fit. I have somebody else that, I might recommend you to somebody else, but So free call, theketoroad.com. We have all the goodies on there, programs, coaching, the whole jazz.
Great. Thank you so much for taking so much time out of your day to be with me. I think you offered a lot of valuable insight today, and I'm really excited for people to get to watch this. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I hope you guys enjoyed this. If so, please like and subscribe, and you can find John and I on Instagram. I'm delighted to meet you, and John is The Keto Road.